In the second turning of the wheel, the Buddha continued to give teachings, and this time it was three concepts that we could summarize all these teachings on. And this was taught at Vulture Peak in Bihar, India. And in this second turning of the wheel refers to this time of turning the wheel of the Dharma. It's an expression of giving Buddhist teachings. And those teachings were focused on emptiness, compassion, and action. So, emptiness is this profound Buddhist concept, and it's understood from different perspectives. So, the perspective I'll share with you is from the Nyingma tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, which is the old tantric lineage of Tibetan Buddhism. It teaches one path called the Great Perfection, or Dzogchen, also known as Vajrayana Buddhism. But the teachings of emptiness in general, we could summarize them in a few main points. So, on the one hand, the teaching of emptiness is based on this Sanskrit word of shunyata, or in Tibetan tongpani, and they refer to things not being what they seem. That even though our world seems really solid and definite, and things seem very permanent, and even our thoughts or our mind states might seem really real, and we have this sensation of things being quite solid and defined, that actually they're not what they seem. And so at the very face value, the teaching of emptiness is this Buddhist teaching that points out things are not what they seem, that actually they're more open-ended than we realize. And they may even, we could say that they are empty, that things, that reality and what we are not actually the same as our concepts of what they are, and that our concepts are incomplete and inadequate for describing what we are or what's happening or what the ultimate nature of reality is. Also, the teachings of emptiness give us this idea of non-self, that at the core of our being, we're not these kinds of static selves, that at the core of our being, we're actually just made up of everything else, that it's highly contextual, that what we are is dynamic and interdependent with everything. Usually we have this idea of kind of taken for granted idea that there's a place I begin and an end, and then a place that others begin, and that there's a definite line between self and other. But in life, we see that line is blurred all the time, like with a parent's love of their children, that what is our self-interest? It is to care for our children, and that identity expands, and we begin to see that our life is actually not just made up of I and me, but also of the other people in our life and the connections. And even our body is made up of the aggregate components that put together this whole matrix of experience that we're having. And that what we are and what we experience ourselves is highly dependent upon the interactions and relationship with others and with our physical phenomenon, the physical world, and our circumstances. So that's the second thing of emptiness. So things are not what they seem, and then also this idea of at the core of our being, it's not this fixed self, but that it's a being that's interconnected with everything. Also, the idea that concepts are not the thing, that even though we might have ideas about something, that ideas at some point come to a limit, and that there's actually experience itself, and that this is a way of knowing. And sometimes that gets confusing. The two compete. There's our experience of things versus all these concepts, and we can't always make them fit because reality is not just made up of that which can be put in these dichotomous categories and in these narrow boxes that our concepts put them in. And so to really seek to know reality directly, that's what the teachings of emptiness point us to. The idea of this direct encounter with reality where things are empty of the meanings that we've previously attributed to them. Also in the idea of emptiness is sometimes it's talked about as if it's like denying all experience, that nothing's real, that nothing exists. But Buddhists, especially Tibetan Buddhism, really focus on how this is a totally misunderstanding of emptiness, or a total misunderstanding. That initially we think it means, oh, what you are isn't real, or your feelings and thoughts, they're not real. But it's more pointing towards this idea that things are only real in a certain way, in a highly temporary and permanent way, and that they have more real aspects and unreal aspects, and that's all there in this really dynamic experience that we have. Of course, it's really important in the Great Perfection teachings in Dzogchen that we understand that emptiness isn't about a void, but it's about this idea of presence. That at the core of what we are, it's not nothing, it's not this void, it is empty of our concepts, but it is a kind of gnosis, a wakefulness, a presence, a lucidity, and that wakefulness is complete. But here in the second turning of the wheel, the teachings were mainly in the initial teachings on emptiness, focused on this main idea that things are not what they seem, and that they're empty of these concepts that we put on them, and that they're interdependent with everything else. And so emptiness. Also, secondly, compassion. The second turning of the wheel, the teaching is focused on the compassionate experience that comes from the realization of emptiness, because we see that we're actually bound up, connected to every other thing in the world. That there's no one that lives in isolation, or no one thing that happens in a vacuum, that everything is connected, and that whatever thoughts that I have or idea I have of who I am, that's connected with what we've been told in our society. It's connected by how others see me. It's connected by even past life karma. It's connected by all of these interacting circumstances, that we're in this matrix of causes and conditions. And all those connections, that interdependent origination, is how we are manifested in our experience. And so naturally, when we see that everything, every action, every thought, and what we are is so interwoven with everything, that insight gives way to spontaneous compassion. There's a sense by which we see that it matters. It matters how we are privately in our own mind. It matters if we have hateful thoughts, or if we wish others well, and that others' happiness and our own are inextricably bound together. It's no such thing. We couldn't even be happy on our own while someone that we love is suffering. It's impossible. We start to see how this interconnectedness is a kind of giving rise to a kind of sense of sympathy and resonance and mercy and compassion. So we have the teaching of emptiness and compassion. Therefore, in the second turning of the wheel is the Bodhisattva Ideal, that we would, seeing this interdependence, that we would devote our lives to helping others, to relieving their suffering. And in a sense, there's no way we can do it for our own mind without also doing it for others. And so it is just a fact of reality that for us to find relief from satisfaction, from dissatisfaction, and to find relief from our own suffering and discontent, we have to work for the benefit of others. Our fate is tied together. And so compassion, but also action. This idea of the Bodhisattva is that we can have benefit in the world. It's not just once we're perfect or once we're fully awakened that we can benefit the world. If we wait till then, it's wasted time. It's possible for us, however we are as ordinary beings, to act for the benefit of others. And so that's why we have this prayer in Buddhism: may all beings everywhere be free from suffering. May all beings everywhere be happy. Or may all beings everywhere attain full awakening, know the nirvana that is peace. There is this kind of dedication prayer, and it's a part of every Buddhist practice, this wish that is the Bodhisattva aspiration, or also known as bodhicitta, this awakened mindset that wishes and works for not only one's own awakening, but the awakening of everyone and everything. And we can see that really manifested in the idea that's in Shantideva's Way of the Bodhisattva teaching, where the Bodhisattva prayer is that may everyone that I'm connected to benefit from our connection. May they awaken. May they be relieved by it. And so this is the second turning of the wheel, teachings on emptiness, compassion, and action.